I think that
Alright, good evening,
that
Earth. This is
what
Adam
is really
Sturch
hanging
broadcasting
up
from the
modern
Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New
biology
Mexico,
is absence,
working
is
on oil painting
unwillingness to entertain the
a midsummer
possibility that life
night's
is
dream.
driven by purpose.
Okay,
This is an old
tonight
chestnut
to
in the
start with this
philosophy of science
figure,
called
what
the
I've decided
issue
on for the lighting
of
is,
teleology.
well, here, let me zoom out.
Teleology is a fancy word
A, so
meaning
YouTube
purpose.
doesn't block me,
And
and B, to do what I'm going to do to the top without forgetting that I'm zoomed in. So I'm going to put a light source here-ish, and these pillars will be the ears of the ass from A Midsummer Night's Dream, with a little face, donkey face right here. And then I'm going to use that light source to light her and retain the gestural initial table markings as her figure tone and wrap a highlight flesh tone around her edges, sort of draping around her this way. And then we'll go from there. I'm going to start populating it with sort of ghostish, fanciful figures from A Midsummer Night's Dream. I'm going to keep this one playful and very weird. So here we go.
Well, Darwin wanted to overcome deism, which was this all-pervasive belief in an interventionist creator who was literally guiding the flight of every atom and the fall of every leaf. And Darwin said, we don't need this kind of invasive, deistic plenum. Let's just take the process of mutation, a random process driven by he knew not what. We now know it's largely driven by incidental cosmic radiation reaching the surface of the Earth. Let's take mutation and natural selection, another random process, and when we run these two random processes head on, lo and behold, out come flamingos, cockroaches, hummingbirds, coral reefs, palm trees, and ourselves. But I think that, and is the co-discoverer of evolution, who, if I believed in reincarnation, I would claim him as my own, Alfred Russel Wallace, was unable to agree with Darwin, and he said, no, that accounts for minor change in organisms, natural selection. But how can you use those processes to account for something like, for instance, the metamorphosis of insects? A caterpillar changing into a butterfly involves the chemical coordination of hundreds, if not thousands, of genes doing a perfectly integrated and flawless ballet of transformation. How incrementally could you ever get a situation where a caterpillar undergoes mutation into a butterfly unless there is some third factor at work in evolution? And Wallace thought that it was an appetition, an appetite, a tendency toward an end state. And that compass notion of evolution means that you're steering toward a goal. Now, in common speech, when we use the word evolution, we usually mean this. But orthodox biologists, I remember when I was studying evolution, I had a professor who said, do not use the word evolution unless you are talking about a process involving genes. In other words, don't talk about the evolution of the novel, or of abstract expressionism, or the evolution of society, or the evolution of a political viewpoint. This is all bad thinking. Well, people like Ilya Prigogine, Wes Churchman, Eric Jantsch have reclaimed evolution as the notion of progressive motion, movement toward higher and higher states of development. But 19th century evolutionists refused to talk about advanced and less advanced, or higher and lower, when they talked about evolution. They just saw it as a random process playing itself out. I don't think so. I think we are called, that nature is hyperdimensional in its architectonics, and that we are flowing toward a culminating purpose, probably the shedding of matter as the vehicle of our becoming. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question about, do you think the information that is contained in psilocybin, DMT, all the hallucinogenics, do you think that the information is self-contained, or is it actually more of just a way of tuning our brains into a more cosmic frequency that exists in the psilocybin, or is the psilocybin just a mediator to a drastic way of tuning into a more cosmic broadcast?
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that it could be in the psilocybin because psilocybin is a very simple molecule. I mean, it's a small molecule, it's a planar molecule. It seems to me what must be happening is that we are embedded in an ocean of information, and psilocybin somehow changes our channel slightly. You know, ordinary consciousness is created by a neurotransmitter called serotonin, 5-hydroxytryptamine, suggestively a very close relative of psilocybin and DMT. And it seems to me, I think I mentioned this a little bit in the talk last night, that we have evolved a neurotransmitter which has the effect of narrowing the focus of consciousness to what is operationally defined by the body as the here and now. In other words, the body is very fragile and site-dependent and must be protected from high levels of radiation, inundation by toxic or life-threatening chemicals like water, and you don't want to have the ocean wash over you or it's a problem. But that these pseudo-neurotransmitters, which are hallucinogens, have not been integrated into normal metabolism because they don't serve the body's need to preserve itself. But what they do serve is an expansion of mental function. And it may be, that these neurotransmitters are in the act of evolving. We no longer need to fear the immediate environment. Well, maybe that's a cheerful overstatement. But one would like to think that we no longer need to fear the immediate environment as much as we did when we were locked in competition with other animal species. Now, it's to me highly suggestive the fact that we contain and metabolize DMT in the course of ordinary metabolism. What does it mean that the most powerful of all psychedelic hallucinogens is a part of normal human metabolism? The pineal gland, whose function is very mysterious, is doing a lot of chemistry that looks like psychedelic chemistry. It's elaborating harmine like beta-carbolines. So it's possible that literally, when we take these tryptamine hallucinogens, we are, as it were, dressing up in the mental furniture of the distant future, that we are experiencing a state of consciousness toward which we are naturally evolving, and that over time and through natural selection, the serotonergic neurotransmitters are making way for these more powerful psychedelic compounds. And this, and the fact, something like imagination looks to me like a self-generated internal involvement with compounds which at some point in the future might replace the compounds of ordinary metabolism and shift our mental life literally into another dimension. Yeah.
Uses organic psychedelics for a period of time. It's a daily dietary supplement, like every day for an extended period of time. Because nobody really talks about that.
How much do you use?
A gram and a half.
Yes, well, one can do that. I've sort of thought that maybe this isn't such a good idea because I'm interested more in spectacular episodes of intoxication, with the exception of cannabis, of course, rather than integrating it as a lifestyle.
And the fact that everyone's doing this as a lifestyle, I mean, I can go alone right now.
Well, is there anybody who wants to join this gentleman in his isolation? At times I've done that, but I found it to be, well, here's the thing. You have to get the dose. The dose is very critical. If you take, say, I would say a half a gram to a gram every day, my experience of that was simply a kind of anxiety, a kind of being set forward, a speed type effect. If you say, well, then I don't want that, so I'm going to lift the dose slightly, and you go to, say, 2.5 grams, the problem I had with that is life quickly evolves into being so strange that I couldn't handle it. In other words, it's very important for me to dip into these places and then to get out, towel off, and think about it. However, there is a streak of the chicken shit in me, I think. If you really want to leave us all behind, and bourgeois values and your job and Bill Clinton and the ozone hole and all of that behind, then if you start taking psilocybin, let's say 4 grams every 3 days, I guarantee you within a month there will be very few people that you will have much in common with. And you will be very happy. You will be very happy with your circumstance generally, I think. But you will have evolved a point of view, a set of values, an expectation that most people will find a lot of difficulty relating to.
Like a shroom shape, let's say, fresh fruit, ice, a gram. You're looking at, what, maybe 3 to 5 hours of time involved with?
Uh-huh.
So that leaves 20 hours left in the day to do everything else you need to do. I mean,
No, but what's the dose again?
say a gram.
Huh. Well, I don't know. See, it may be just a matter of personal style. When I take psilocybin, I give it 110% of my attention. So I can't do it and work at the computer or make phone calls or shop or deliver my children to lessons and stuff like that. And so my idea with this is to completely come down between doses, and then, you're virgin again. You don't keep hallucinating. No, it becomes something else. See, I don't want you to feel PA, but I think that what people do with drugs that is probably a bad idea is they take too little too often. And that the best way to do drugs is to take very challenging doses, rarely. I mean, I used to say to my groups, if you haven't taken enough that you think you may have done too much, then you did too little. In other words, you really want to dissolve the boundary. You don't want to integrate it into this world. You want to have an experience which you can then integrate into this world after the trip.
Everyone always talks about language
and thought processes, and I feel as though most of my best work is under that period of 1 to 1.5 grams of dosage, and I just don't understand how, the recommended experience is much more than what I'm doing, obviously. And,
Well, have you taken large doses? Well, isn't that much more interesting?
I guess it comes down to what it is you're looking to do while you're doing it. It's not a matter of interesting, it's a matter of what your purpose is, what your intent is, what your
Right.
trip is.
Well, at these higher doses, you can't do anything.
Of course, that's my point.
I mean, you hanging on to the floor is a major program to be executed. Yeah.
How does that exist in currently?
You mean for days and days?
Well, yeah. I mean, could you live?
You can live, but you will alarm your friends and quickly become an object of community concern because, for ordinary people, you are what is called nuts. And
does the experience just become almost like a three-dimensional TV? I mean, you take a second, it becomes a drug.
oh, no, I think you underestimate how strange it is. I don't think you could ever get used to these places. Sometimes people ask me if DMT is dangerous, and the honest answer is only if you fear death by astonishment. And death by astonishment is a real danger in these places. I mean, these places are not simply strange or amazing or highly peculiar. They are absolutely confounding. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get across, is this is not going to require just some minor adjustment of our worldview. These are the things they said were impossible. The things they promised, assured were impossible, are possible. The greatest secret that has been kept from us is that the world is 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times stranger than your wildest supposition. And how they keep the lid on this stuff, I do not understand. I mean, I don't understand why I'm the only person saying this, because I'm completely convinced of my own ordinariness. I am only a human being. I represent all of you. What happens to me would happen to you. There's nothing special about me. Well then, God, how do they keep the lid on this stuff? It's weird. It's more, if a fleet of flying saucers were to land on the south lawn of the White House tomorrow, it would not change the fact that the weirdest thing in the universe is the DMT flash. Flying saucers landing on the south lawn of the White House is a positively mundane possibility compared to this thing which is real. It's here, it's now. You don't have to go to Babaji, you don't have to go to the Himalayas. It's 3 tokes away. And yet, we argue, is it possible? What does it mean? Is it this? Is it that? It's amazing to me. I mean, it is the new world. The Europeans eventually discovered the new world, but they had to sail galleons 3 months through hell to get there. This is 3 tokes and 30 seconds away, and it is the absolute confounding exhibit of the whole structure of Western civilization. How can they keep the lid on it? I don't get it.
Where does individual spiritual development fit in without use of hallucinogens in your world or into your scheme of thinking? And 2, last night you talked about the business of being should be the cultivation of love, and I'd like to hear more about that now or later. And 3rd, I'd like to know what do you think you would be doing today in life if you had never used any psychedelics?
Well, first to the spiritual question, which is an interesting question to me. Everyone casts the psychedelic experience in terms of being a subcategory of the spiritual quest. I'm not exactly sure about that. I've taken lots of psychedelics over nearly 30 years now, and I have a marriage dissolving. I have people who will tell you I'm a terrible person to negotiate a contract with. I feel myself to be a moral paragon of nothing. And I'm not sure it has anything to do with the spiritual quest. It seems to me true spirituality is a very here and now matter. One should visit the sick and imprisoned, clothe the naked, bury the dead, care for orphans, feed the hungry. That's what the spiritual life is about. It's very down to earth, straightforward. I'm very puzzled, and I put more than psychedelics in this category. What, like mantras, yantras, practices, do these things really ameliorate the suffering of the human condition? They may be good for something. The question is what? Perhaps indirectly the psychedelics synergize the spiritual life because they just show you that life is to be taken seriously and there is a great deal of it to be assimilated. But in terms of suggesting that you are a more spiritually advanced person if you take psychedelics, I don't really see any evidence for that. I do think that you cannot take psychedelics without losing a portion of your ego, because it's too hard for the egomaniac to take psychedelics. The egoist will turn away from it, will have such bad trips that they will put it down, I think. This is an interesting question, this question of like the question I ask myself. Here we are psychedelic people, presumably by some high percentage. Are we in any way morally superior to people who don't take psychedelics? Maybe we're a little bit gentler and more open-minded, but probably in any mud wrestling situation, we can be just as down and dirty as the next person to some degree. So I see it more as, that's why I don't think of myself as a guru. I think of myself as an explorer of a geography, the purposes of which are probably multiple. In other words, I suppose we can use psychedelics to shape personalities and brainwash people and control them. And I suppose we can use it to lead people to make peace with death, mortality, their own limitations. It seems to me it's a morally neutral dimension, and it can be used for good or ill, and maybe slightly edging toward the good, because it's very hard for egomaniacs to do anything with this stuff. The CIA's involvement with LSD is an instructive situation. The CIA got onto LSD well ahead of everybody else, and the first notion was, and if you're interested in this, you can read the other one, Acid Dreams, that book, Martin Lee's book, and Schlein was the co-author. The CIA's first assumption about LSD was that it was a kind of super truth serum, and that they could kidnap KGB agents and give them LSD, and they would spew out all their contacts and so forth and so on. So a year of researching that possibility convinced them they were on the wrong track. And so then they decided it isn't a truth serum, it's an anti-truth serum. We will give our agents this drug, and if they ever fall into enemy hands, they will take it, and then it will be impossible for the enemy to get any coherent account out of them of what is going on. Well, so then a few months of that, and they discovered, no, under some circumstances, our people just tell all under LSD. So then they decided that they could program a Manchurian candidate type situation with it. Well, then that was abandoned, and I think largely they have lost interest in this stuff. I asked in the Amazon, I asked the mushroom at one point, because I could see that we were going to carry it back to the world in some form. I said, can't this be perverted? Can't it be misused? And it said, only the good can come near this. Well, maybe good doesn't mean exactly what we think it means. You know, it isn't a kind of piety worn on your cuff. It's something else. It's a sincere wish to understand. That's the motivation that the psychedelics will turbocharge. As to your question about what would I be doing if I hadn't taken psychedelics, well, I don't know. What I was doing, what I assumed I would end up doing before I took psychedelics was hopefully end up teaching art history in a very exclusive Eastern girls' school somewhere for a long, long time. It was a kind of Nabokovian lecturing was my life's plan. And what was your, and love. Well, in my analysis of what psychedelics do, if you think not about my trip or your trip, but thousands, tens of thousands of these experiences, what can we say that would be true of every psychedelic experience, every
All right, that
psychedelic
gets
experience?
an edge and a hand and most of her face and the hair set up a little bit better. My ham, excuse me.
Psychedelics dissolve boundaries.
I'm going to do a second take and do her left side and take two coming up.
Nature and self and other, they
Take two.
dissolve boundaries. And this is what love does when it is working right. I mean, you are able to place yourself in the second position for a child, for a lover, for a cause, for whatever it is. You know, you take second position. And so I see them essentially as aphrodisiacs of a strange sort. They empower not genital prowess, but real caring by showing that all differences are illusions, that what is real is the unbroken, seamless plenum of being. And this is what we need to learn, because our whole social construct has been based on the establishment and maintenance of boundaries. I mean, we are the most boundary-obsessed human society that has ever existed. When I go to the Amazon and spend time with the upriver people, the hardest thing for me to get used to is that I never have any privacy, ever. I hang my hammock in the longhouse, and, people are fighting and giving birth and having sex and arguing and doing all these things. And even the act of defecation is not necessarily private. So boundary dissolution and boundary maintenance is what really, anxiety about these things is what characterizes our society, I think, and I will mention it briefly here before the break, that some of you may have somehow escaped being exposed to my theory of human evolution, which is contained in Food of the Gods. I think that we achieved a kind of perfection in human relations and in the relationship between human beings and nature sometime in the last million years, and that we maintained that relationship till as recently as 15,000 years ago. And we achieved this through a quasi-symbiotic, or let's put it this way, an incipiently symbiotic relationship to psilocybin. You see, I'll give this to you in the short form, because probably most of you have heard it. All primates organize themselves using male dominance hierarchies. You go clear back into lemurs and squirrel monkeys, and it's the hard-muscled, sharp-fanged young males who set the agenda, and everybody else, women, children, weak older males, have to dance to that tune. This is a characteristic of primate organization. It is also a characteristic of our society today as we sit here and we know that the suppression not only of women as individuals, but of the feminine itself as an idea has made us tremendously, has blocked our potential and made us tremendously neurotic. Well, I think that when we came down out of the trees, we were male dominators, hierarchically organized creatures, and then we encountered psilocybin as an item within our diet. And without anybody realizing what was happening, it constituted a chemical intervention against hierarchical organization. And orgiastic means sharing of sexual partners' style arose in the wake of accepting psilocybin into the diet. Psilocybin promoted in low doses increased visual acuity. This is an established fact. And that allowed the psilocybin-using members of the species to outbreed the non-psilocybin-using members. And human consciousness had been evolving, continued to evolve, and through the augmentation of psilocybin fell into a relationship of direct experience with this goddess-like Gaian totality, the mind of the earth. And then there was a dynamic, satisfying balance between the expression of human advanced cognitive faculties and a human sense of our place in nature and our roles vis-a-vis each other, and so forth and so on. In short, paradise. And it persisted for, who knows, let's say 1 million years. And it only faded when the mushrooms became, through climatological change and migration, unavailable. And when the mushroom became scarce and scarcer and unavailable, after 1 million years of chemical suppression of the primate tendency to form dominance hierarchies, the old behavior, which had never been genetically removed from the picture, re-emerged 12,000 years ago, no more. And it must have been like hell itself. People suddenly no longer were caring for each other. Suddenly men wanted to control the sexual and reproductive activities of women. The concept of territory emerged. This is at the precise moment in time when agriculture was invented. Agriculture put an end to the nomadic yearly wanderings of the human family. It put emphasis on sedentary lifestyles. The problem with agriculture, especially in the early phase, was that it was so phenomenally successful. You can imagine farming the alluvial detritus of these river valleys that had never been touched. Surpluses were created. Surplus, in the presence of a dominator or hierarchical attitude, must be defended. And so suddenly you have haves and have-nots, us and them. The most advanced structure on this planet 11,000 years ago was the grain tower at Jericho. It was a storage area for grain, and it was a tower so that you could beat back attacks by hungry neighbors that you no longer identified with sufficiently to share your food. And in the absence of psilocybin, this structure emerged in the psyche, which we call ego. if you have psilocybin in your diet, the ego, it's like taking chemotherapy or something. The calcareous tumor of ego is never able to form in a situation where psilocybin is being taken, group sexual experiences in a religious context are being orchestrated at the new and full moon, sharing of food, sharing of child care, sharing of sexual partners. All that is ended when the ego is born, and the ego is the boundary establisher par excellence, because it establishes me and mine as opposed to you and yours. And with the invention of agriculture, the establishment of large sedentary populations, that means cities, the establishment of specialized roles, that means kingship, the emergence of male dominance, the emergence of warfare. These are the institutions that are fatal to our higher aspiration, to our hopes, even at this moment as they were 10 to 15,000 years ago. That's why I think, we have to chemically intervene, because we have fallen into a dysfunctional relationship toward the components of our own psyche. And it's fine if monkeys want to dominate each other, but when you have, in the space in which we existed in the psilocybin-maintained partnership mode, we developed language, symbolic representation, dance, theater, so forth and so on, and we acquired and empowered the tremendous imagination that has allowed us to build the cultures that we see around us. That kind of power is only safe in the hands of collective, community-minded creatures. And in the hands of ego-driven creatures, it leads straight to Auschwitz and the hydrogen bomb, as it did. So I think, history is a state of chemical deprivation that allows ancient animal patterns of behavior that degrade and confuse us to reemerge and stabilize themselves.
What was the response be to that?
You mean in the present situation?
The assumption is that there is scarcity now, then what would that invoke? If surplus...
Well, what it invokes is an ever greater distance between those at the top and those at the bottom of the social pyramid, and an ever fiercer and an emergence of ever more brutal behavior patterns, which is what we see happening. I mean, our world is getting uglier and meaner and more mean-spirited by the moment, because those who have are so anxious about the fact that they might be asked to share it. I mean, what we've gone through in the last 12 years in this country is a tremendous transfer of wealth to the upper 2% of society, and
all right, and now before I start working on the sort of translucent forms of the figures that will be populating the area, I think I'm going to give the sky a distinctive purplish blue glowing gloaming tone. So it's 17 minutes left. I'll mix up a color real quick just to keep it rolling.
Very well-defended pleasure domes in which a very small number of incredibly wealthy people will live out lives of utterly self-indulgent hedonistic fantasy in denial of the moral catastrophe that they participated in order to achieve that hedonic state of isolation. I mean, that's clearly happening. Metaphorically, that's what we have already. I mean, not to freak you out, but that's where we're sitting right now, I mean, compared to Bosnia and Haiti and Somalia.
But surplus creates defensiveness, and scarcity creates defensiveness, then what is the alternative?
Well, it neither create defensiveness except in the presence of the ego. In other words, what we have to do is teach people to care for each other as a primary value, not something you do after, you know, you pay for your Mercedes and all that, but as the primary value. We have to have community. It's very simple. We don't have community. We have a free-for-all where the devil takes the hindmost. The most brutal and ruthless among us rise to the top, and everybody else has a foot on their neck. We are now in a hell of a fix because we've waited so long to address these problems. There is not now enough gold, aluminum, iron, so forth in the planet to raise everyone to a middle-class standard as it's enjoyed in Southern California. And yet we have unleashed these expectations in everyone by flagellating people with images of material wealth and comfort. We must re-empower the individual and the quality of individual experience. In other words, you have to convince somebody that you are a richer person on 5 grams of psilocybin than you are if you live in a $5 million house and are spending $50,000 a year on psychotherapy because you're miserable, you see. We have allowed ourselves to be tremendously disempowered by allowing our values to shift toward the material domain. You can't take it with you, folks, but the soul is the vehicle that you do take with you into whatever dimensions of continuity exist beyond this mortal coil. So instead of balancing and replacing the tires on your Porsche, you should be balancing and replacing the tires on your after-death vehicle. After all, that's the one that's going to have to serve you well in the clinches, you see. Yeah.
How do you work with the terror in dissolving, on your journey? How do you work with the terror in dissolving the ego boundaries?
Well, you're right. There is a component of terror in this kind of work. You know, the Rolling Stones song, "You don't get what you want, you get what you need," is never more true than with psychedelics. But in terms of practical suggestions, fear has many aspects, but one aspect of it is it has a chemistry. And the chemistry of fear is fairly short-term. You've probably all experienced driving on the freeway and somebody cuts right in front of you, and there is it feels like your body temperature must rise about 5 degrees in about a third of a second. It's an incredibly fast chemistry that goes on there, and then in about 5 seconds you fall back down to within normal parameters. The one way to deal with fear is sit still and wait. In other words, the psychedelic terror is usually fairly unfocused. It is simply raw terror. Well, just sit still and shut up and watch the chemicals in your mind tear those molecules apart, and rarely can the fear sustain itself more than 5 or 10 minutes because it has the force of a blow, but then you can sustain the blow and chemical equilibrium returns. The other thing, and this is great, very good advice, don't forget it. It's hard for Western people to keep it on their plate. Sing. The way we relate to terror is we crunch, clench, withdraw, and hunch over in some kind of fetal position, like you're being beat on. What you want to do is sit up straight, straighten your spinal column, open your air passages, and begin to cycle oxygen through. And if you sing in a very few minutes,
oh shit. I did exactly what I said I didn't want to do. except instead of doing the
So that's
donkey,
very practical.
I did the sky
Mantra.
off camera.
It doesn't
That's okay.
matter,
So it's kind of
mantra,
nice. As a transition,
yantra,
it'll be a shocking
you know,
jump
everything
in the final
becomes
version and just a
profound on
subtle
psychedelics.
fuck up in this
I mean,
one.
I
So,
tend
apologies to my
row,
5
row,
viewers.
row your boat gently
But
down
anyway,
the
I think
stream. Marilyn,
might just leave it there for the
Marilyn,
moment, let that all set up, and then go back for another layer.
Well,
Oh,
I
sneeze
see it's
coming.
lunchtime. Why don't we break? Keep your
False alarm.
keep your
Okay,
questions.
well, almost like
We'll,
half sneezed and clutched.
Come
And,
back at about a quarter to
horrible,
2,
horrible feeling.
and then we'll
All right, have a good night, Earth. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Midsummer Night's Dream.